Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Yuri Tovbin. This time I have something else for you. I have the text of a speech delivered by John F. Kennedy, the American president. It was delivered in New York at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel on April the 27th, 1971. He spoke to the editors and publishers of American newspapers, and he called that an address to the press. I think he used the word press very loosely to include newspapers, magazines, television, and everything else that is now called the media. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, господин председатель, дамы и господа. I forgot to mention, but will mention now, that not only shall I explain the vocabulary, grammar, and stuff like that, but I will also be translating President Kennedy's speech into Russian to show you how you have to transform English sentences to Russian sentences to fit the standards and the custom of the Russian language. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, nothing of interest here, but the very next sentence is already a good one. I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. Appreciate is a well-known verb which means ценить что-то. I appreciate your kindness. Я ценю вашу любезность. I appreciate your coming in on time. Я очень рад, я благодарю вас, я очень ценю вас за вашу пунктуальность. But in many situations, appreciate is just used to express gratitude, to say thank you. In this case, it is used exactly in this meaning. Particularly if you translate into Russian, you would not say «Я ценю ваше приглашение». «Я очень благодарен вам за приглашение» would be a much better Russian sentence. Now, your generous invitation, ваша любезная по-русски будет хорошо, ваше любезное приглашение, your generous invitation, if you translate it literally, would be ваше щедрое приглашение, but you would never say this in Russian, ваше любезное приглашение. Generous actually is a good adjective. It does mean щедрый. You can say a generous gift, a generous piece of steak, достаточно большой бифштекс, a generous offer, ваше любезное предложение, you're offering something that you can do for me. Generous, good word. To be here tonight, if translated literally, would say быть здесь сегодня вечером, which is something you will never say in Russian. So the whole sentence translates «Я вам очень признателен за любезное приглашение выступить перед вами». Tonight and here are not in the Russian sentence, as you may have noticed, but they shouldn't be there because it's not the Russian tradition. Let's take the next one. You bear heavy responsibilities these days, and an article I read some time ago reminded me of how particularly heavily the burdens of present-day events bear upon your profession. Good sentence, interesting sentence. You bear heavy responsibilities. Дословно, вы несете тяжелый груз ответственностей. Нести груз ответственности is acceptable in Russian, but ответственности in the plural is not acceptable at all. Вы несете груз ответственности, or I would say, на вас лежит тяжелый груз ответственности in the singular. These days is an adverbial modifier of time, which in English follows the verb. In Russian, very frequently, it precedes the verb, it stands before the verb. So if I were to translate this sentence into Russian, I would say «Сегодня или в эти дни на вас лежит тяжелый груз ответственности». And then he goes on to say «И статья, которую я недавно прочитал, напомнила мне о том, напомнила мне о том, что, напомнила мне о том, как, напомнила мне о том, где, in English would be reminded me of when, reminded me of how, reminded me of what I was supposed to do, reminded me of where I was supposed to meet him, reminded me of how often I had heard this word before, reminded me of, and then a phrase or a clause, придаточное предложение, of how particularly heavily the burdens of present-day events bear upon your profession. Вы в нынешнее время или сегодня на вас лежат тяжелые ответственности is not good, so you would say сегодня на вас лежит тяжелая ответственность или на вас лежит громадный груз ответственности. И статья, которую я недавно прочел, напомнила мне о том, насколько тяжелой является эта ноша нынешних событий для представителей вашей профессии. Upon your profession is на вашей профессии, but you would not say this in Russian. Насколько тяжелая ноша лежит на плечах представителей вашей профессии. You may remember that in 1851, the New York Herald Tribune, under the sponsorship and publishing of Horace Greeley, employed as its London correspondent an obscure journalist by the name of Karl Marx. Another good sentence. You may remember. Возможно, вы помните. May, the modal verb here, expresses probability. Возможно, вы помните that in 1851, что в 1851 году газета The New York Herald Tribune, it doesn't say the newspaper here, because in America everybody knows what the New York Herald Tribune is. In Russia, some people may know, some people may not know. So you would explain it to them for their benefit. Газета New York Herald Tribune, under the sponsorship and publishing, под арестом, под руководством, под председательством are all good Russian phrases, but под спонсорством и публикованием Гораса Грили, you would not say this in Russian under any circumstances. So you would say газета New York Herald Tribune, спонсором и издателем которой являлся Хорас Грили, employed, взяла на работу as its London correspondent, в качестве своего лондонского корреспондента, an obscure journalist. Obscure in this case is никому неизвестный, but obscure is also it's a word that means other things as well. Obscure means barely visible. An obscure picture, замазанная картина, где половина не видно. You obscure my view, вы мне загораживаете весь вид. A movie camera or a movie projector in the olden times was known as camera obscura, because the shutter